On the 17th of December 1969, an experimental technical session was booked for the studios at the BBC to test possible applications of the CSO process, more known to us as chroma key, for the story The Ambassadors of Death. However, it was first used in the previous story, Doctor Who and the Silurians. This test session took place just 4 days before its debut in episode 3. In this particular story, CSO was used to key out the small screens in the Silurian base. It was also used on a much bigger scale to key out the background of some of the cave shots to give depth. After recording completed for Doctor Who and the Silurians on January 26, 1970, The Ambassadors of Death went into production. In this story, CSO was once again used for the screens, this time the big screen in Space Control. This story also elaborated on the keyed out backgrounds. This was seen in episode 6, when the Doctor comes out of Recovery 7 and walks down the tunnel. In the next story, and the final story of Season 7, Inferno, this continued the CSO blow-up trend, keying out the entrance to the Doctor's hut. It was also used for the famous cliffhanger of the story, the cliffhanger to episode 6, when the drilling project has gone wrong and lava is consuming the Earth. CSO was used to show the lava approaching. In the next story, Terror of the Autons, producer Barry Letts decided to direct. He was a big fan of this new technique and saw the opportunity to replace photographic blow-up or back projection backgrounds with a simpler blue or yellow screen. This is probably the most liberal use of CSO, with the second part's famous CSO kitchen being a clear example of this serial's use of the effect. In the final story of the season, The Demons, director Christopher Barry used CSO to make Azal grow to a far more enormous size than Stephen Thorne's 6'5" height, although Barry has said since that this helped immensely with making the effect more convincing. It does seem that in the story The Day of the Daleks, CSO was intended to be used, as the view outside the doors of the Doctor's lab is a yellow CSO screen. Another notable story to use CSO was The Green Death, the final story of Season 10. Director Michael Bryant used CSO so many times, including the cave sequences, the Doctor driving through the fields of giant maggots, and strangely, some sequences that were most likely intended to be shot on location, but were instead shot in studio. The first story of the following production block, Invasion of the Dinosaurs, needed CSO to make its supposed villains, the dinosaurs, far bigger than the small puppets were. And indeed, the final conclusion to the story included a very important CSO shot, with John Pertwee in front of a yellow screen and the other using a freeze frame with a plethora of electronic effects in the mix. By the end of the season, producer Barry Letts was moving on, and so decided to use as much CSO as possible in his final story, Planet of the Spiders. In the following story, Robot, director Christopher Barry used CSO to make the K1 robot grow huge and pick up Sarah Jane. In the Ark in Space, director Rodney Bennett used CSO in the first opening model shot. This had been used before in The Cause of Axos in 1971, but this was elaborated on in this shot. In other stories, such as Revenge of the Cybermen, directors opted to use CSO to create futuristic screens instead of using a normal studio monitor. In Terror of the Zygons, the model shots of the Scarrison were superimposed over shots of the Thames, making it appear as if the Loch Ness Monster was invading London. In Pyramids of Mars, director Paddy Russell combined CSO with another effect, rollback and mix, which will be elaborated on in a later episode. It enabled the sarcophagus to open up and lead to Sutek's time tunnel. By the time Season 18 was going into production, digital effects were developing fast. In the Leisure Hive, it was CSO's first digital go on Doctor Who. The CSO shots were shot without keying out. It was then put into the Quantel paint box and digitised. The colour, now normally blue, was digitally keyed out. This technique was used until the end of the classic era.